Imagine for a moment the silence after betrayal. Not the loud, shattering kind, no. The kind that creeps in quietly, like dusk swallowing the light. The kind of silence that comes after you've given your all. Your love, your loyalty, your soul. And in return you were broken. You trusted, you hoped. You believed in the goodness of people, in the honesty of words, in the sanctity of promises. But all of it was shattered, not by an enemy, but by someone who smiled while they sharpened the knife. The pure-hearted always bleed first. They believe too quickly. They forgive too easily. They love too deeply. And because of this, they are seen as weak, taken for granted, exploited, used like stepping stones by those whose hearts are full of deceit and ambition. And yet, despite all the cruelty they endure, they continue to show up with kindness. They continue to extend mercy. They continue to pray even for those who wronged them. But what happens to those who trample the hearts of the innocent? What becomes of the ones who lie, manipulate, betray, and destroy just to get ahead, to feed their pride or silence their own emptiness? The world may turn a blind eye, but heaven never does. You see, purity is not weakness. It is power restrained. It is strength under control. And those who hurt the pure-hearted do not just commit cruelty. They wage war against something sacred. They declare battle against a heart that was aligned with goodness, and that is not a battle they can win. It might seem like they've won in the moment. They walk away proud, unbothered, with no remorse in sight. They laugh while you cry. They build their castles with your ruins. But time, you'll see, is not loyal to the wicked. Time reveals, time avenges. Time exposes what eyes missed and what lips lied about. Because time is in the hands of God, and God is not mocked. So many suffer in silence, thinking their pain is forgotten, thinking their heartbreak was just another accident in a world full of chaos. But no cry goes unheard, no tear falls unnoticed. There is a divine record being kept, and while God may seem slow to act, he is never unjust. What he delays, he perfects. What he waits on, he ensures is complete. And when God decides to move, he moves with precision. The ones who broke you will break, not by your hand, not by your vengeance, but by the very force they invited when they chose to touch a heart that was pure, when they chose to damage someone who only ever meant good. Because the weight of hurting the innocent is heavier than it seems. It does not fade with time. It grows, it festers, and it destroys from within. Perhaps you've looked around and wondered, why do the cruel prosper? Why do the wicked dance while the righteous weep? But don't confuse delay with denial. Don't confuse silence with absence. God is working quietly, powerfully, and justly. The destruction of the wicked is not always loud. Sometimes it is slow, sometimes it is internal, sometimes it is everything they thought they wanted, turning into everything they can't escape. So, to the pure-hearted, do not become bitter, do not let your heart harden, do not let their poison turn you into them. Hold your ground in grace, keep your soul in peace, and trust, truly trust, that the one who saw it all will not allow injustice to go unanswered. Some Azawani Sanza, because there is something sacred in you, and those who touch that sacredness with impure hands, they will be dealt with by the same force that shaped the stars, by the same justice that drowned empires, by the same hands that lift the humble and shatter the prideful. Their destruction is not a maybe, it is a matter of divine timing. They thought hurting you would elevate them, but it invited their fall. It always begins the same way, quietly, subtly, like a shadow stretching slowly across the floor before the sun disappears. They saw your goodness and mistook it for naivety. They watched how your heart poured freely, how you gave without calculating the cost, how your intentions were always pure, and they saw that as weakness. They believed that if they crushed you, they would rise higher, that if they used you as a stepping stone, they'd get ahead, and they believed they could do it without consequence. But here's the cruel truth. They didn't hurt you by accident. They hurt you intentionally. They studied your kindness. They memorized your boundaries. They learned your vulnerabilities. And then they used those very things against you. Not because they were stronger, but because they were emptier. They wanted to feel powerful. They wanted to feel in control. So they took the most beautiful thing about you, your sincerity, and they crushed it under their own insecurities. You may have asked yourself over and over, what did I do to deserve this? Why would someone I loved and trusted treat me like this? But it was never about you being wrong. It was about you being right. Your light exposed their darkness. Your love reminded them of what they lacked. And instead of rising to your level, they tried to drag you down to theirs. That wasn't love. That was envy masked in affection. That was sabotage disguised as intimacy. They thought that by breaking you, they could build their own throne. That by silencing your voice, theirs would sound louder. But betrayal doesn't elevate anyone. It only digs a deeper hole beneath their feet, one they will eventually fall into. And here's the tragedy they never considered. Hurting a pure-hearted soul doesn't end with the act itself. It begins a ripple, a spiritual consequence that cannot be avoided. When they made the decision to harm someone who meant no harm, when they laughed at your tears and turned your pain into their punchline, they declared war with something far greater than your emotions. They challenged the balance of divine justice. They believed they could escape the fallout because you were too forgiving, too silent, too soft. They relied on your mercy. But what they failed to see is that mercy given is not mercy guaranteed. There is a line even the most patient soul cannot ignore. And beyond that line lies the reckoning. Where masks fall, where pretenses crumble, and where intentions return to haunt the one who created them. So, while they may seem to move on, smiling in pictures, thriving in new friendships, living like nothing ever happened, do not be deceived. The universe has its own memory. God does not forget. And the very trap they set for you will become the path to their own undoing. Their fall won't be dramatic, but it will be absolute. It will come quietly, through broken trust, through inner emptiness, through losses they can't explain, and they will wonder why things are falling apart, but the answer will trace back to the day they chose to hurt the one who only wanted to love them. The innocent carry heaven's favor, and heaven always defends its own. There's something sacred about the innocent, something unexplainable. They are the ones who walk through fire and still offer warmth, the ones who are lied to and still speak the truth, the ones who are betrayed, slandered, discarded, but never lose their essence. It's easy to overlook them, to mistake their silence for weakness, to take their patience for permission, but heaven watches them closely, because heaven knows their weight, and heaven defends what the world discards. You may have been that person, the one who showed up when no one else did, the one who gave even when there was nothing left to give, the one who waited, prayed, forgave and stayed, only to be abandoned when you needed someone the most. And maybe, for a long time, you carried that pain in silence, thinking that no one saw, that no one knew. But let this be the truth that lifts your head today. God saw everything. Every tear, every disappointment, every betrayal you kept hidden so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. You weren't just collateral in someone else's mess. You were chosen to carry purity in a world that mocks it. You were called to love, even when it wasn't returned. And that calling comes with protection. maybe not in the form of instant justice or immediate answers, but in the form of sacred attention from heaven. Because the world overlooks what heaven exalts, and those who harm the innocent may walk away unaware, but they walk under the eye of divine judgment. The favor of heaven isn't loud. It doesn't show itself in applause or fame. It's quiet. It works in the background. It shields. It delays destruction until the right moment. It gathers evidence. And then, when the time is right, it reveals itself, not just for the punishment of the guilty, but for the restoration of the one who was wronged. You might have spent nights asking God why he didn't stop them, why he allowed the betrayal. But sometimes the silence of God is not neglect, it's preparation. Sometimes he lets the plan unfold, not to protect your comfort, but to prove your innocence. And when he acts completely. Those who mocked you, who laughed behind your back, who twisted your name and turned your goodness into weakness, they thought they had the final word. But God always speaks last, and his defense isn't just a return of peace, it's a full reversal of what was done. Where you were broken, he builds. Where you were left empty, he fills. Where you were humiliated, he places honor. Never doubt your worth just because others were blind to it. God wasn't. He's been keeping watch over your heart like a gardener guards a fragile bloom. And those who stepped into the garden with dirty hands, thinking they could uproot you without consequence, will answer for every scar they left behind. Their betrayal became their bondage. They will never know true peace again. Betrayal always comes with a price. But what most people don't understand is that the one who betrays carries the heaviest cost. Not immediately, not outwardly, but slowly, silently, deeply. While they may seem to move forward unbothered, there is a prison being constructed within them. A prison made of guilt, denial, and spiritual unrest. And that prison is their own doing. When they betrayed you, they didn't just break a promise or violate trust. They pierced something sacred. They took a soul that was pure and loyal, and they made it question itself. They turned safety into fear, love into doubt, and faith into confusion. But while you were left with open wounds, they were left with a curse far more dangerous: the inability to feel peace again. You see, peace does not come to those who steal it from others. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be bought. It cannot be faked for long. It lives in alignment with truth, and when someone violates truth, especially the truth of someone's love, someone's loyalty, someone's innocence, they exile themselves from that peace. Their soul knows what their mind refuses to accept. And the longer they pretend everything is fine, the louder the unrest inside them grows. They may smile in public. They may post pictures with new people, tell new stories, live new lives, but none of it can erase what they did. The memory of your tears, the sound of your voice when you broke, the moment their mask fell and they chose betrayal. It all lingers. It doesn't just go away. It echoes. And that echo becomes louder in silence, heavier in solitude, and unbearable in the stillness of the night. That is their real punishment. Not the downfall that others can see, but the internal chaos that no one else hears. The racing thoughts, the sleepless nights, the creeping guilt that appears in dreams and quiet moments, the regret they can't explain. They may not admit it. In fact, most won't. They'll double down. They'll point fingers. They'll rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. But the truth doesn't need their permission to exist. It lives. It breathes. It follows. And over time, that truth begins to consume them. It isolates them from joy. It poisons new relationships. It sabotages opportunities. because betrayal becomes a seed of rot within them. They touched something sacred and walked away thinking they had won. But in reality, they traded their peace for temporary pride. They exchanged inner wholeness for an illusion of control, and now their soul walks with a limp they cannot fix. God allows this, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. He doesn't need to destroy them externally to make his point. He lets their own choices do the work. He lets the betrayal they crafted turn into a storm they cannot escape. He lets their conscience become the courtroom. And in that courtroom, there are no lawyers, no excuses, no applause, just silence and truth. The peace you cried for will return to you, but the peace they once had, it left the moment they decided to betray someone who only wanted to love them. You were broken publicly, but they will be judged silently and sharply. It's a cruel reality. How the world often sides with the loudest voice, the cleverest liar, the most confident mask. When you were broken, it wasn't hidden. It was visible in your silence, your eyes, your trembling hands. You had to carry the weight of someone else's betrayal while being misunderstood, questioned, even blamed. And the worst part? They walked away untouched, at least in the eyes of others. They paraded their version of the story. They mocked your pain, sometimes not with words, but with indifference. They made your hurt look like weakness, your loyalty look like foolishness, and you stood there with a heart full of truth while they wore the crown of deception. The world didn't notice. No one came rushing in to defend you. You were left to gather your pieces in the dark. But while their betrayal was loud, God's judgment is silent. While they may have succeeded in painting themselves as heroes or victims, the true story was never lost on heaven. And heaven never needs applause. It doesn't need witnesses. Divine justice doesn't scream, it strikes. They will not see it coming. The unraveling will be quiet. The correction will be surgical. And while it may not be posted on social media or shouted from rooftops, it will be real. It will be precise. It will hit the very things they pride themselves on. What they worshipped will crumble. What they boasted in will betray them. And in the silence of their life, God will speak. He speaks through delay, through disappointment, through failure, through confusion. He speaks when doors close, when relationships fall apart, when the people they used to impress walk away without reason. And they will have no explanation for the emptiness that follows, but deep down they will know. This is not random. This is not bad luck. This is justice coming home. You who were broken in front of people must understand this. God doesn't waste pain. He records it. He watches closely, and he repays, not in ways that make headlines, but in ways that haunt hearts. He brings consequences in silence, and that silence is louder than any crowd. There will come a day when they sit alone with everything they thought mattered and feel nothing. No joy, no meaning, no peace, because what they built was not founded in truth. It was founded on your pain. And anything built on another's suffering cannot stand. It was founded on your pain. And anything built on another's suffering cannot stand. It was founded on another's suffering cannot stand. So while they may have judged you publicly, while they may have laughed as you fell apart, their judgment is coming from a higher court. And that court does not take bribes, believe lies, or miss details. That court sees what human eyes overlook, and when it moves without warning. God preserves the dignity of the pure and dismantles the proud. There is something sacred about the quiet dignity of a pure-hearted soul. It's not loud, it's not boastful, and it doesn't parade itself before the world begging for attention. Instead, it's wrapped in humility, silent, steady, and unwavering. It's the kind of dignity that doesn't demand to be seen, yet it leaves a lasting impression on every soul it touches. And when such a soul is hurt, marked, humiliated, discarded by someone they loved, the heavens pay attention in ways the world cannot imagine. When you were humiliated, it wasn't just an emotional wound, it was spiritual. They didn't merely walk away from you, they tried to reduce your worth, they tried to rewrite your story, they tried to make you feel like you were too much, or worse, not enough. The pain of betrayal is one thing, but the pain of being belittled, of being made to feel foolish for being kind, loyal, or patient, is another form of cruelty altogether. They shamed you for your silence. They mocked you for your softness. They labeled your boundaries as weaknesses, your forgiveness as desperation, your empathy as blindness. They puffed up with pride, convinced they had outsmarted you, and for a while it looked like they had won. They moved on while you were still trying to breathe through the pain. They gathered new people, made new alliances, created new stories, leaving you behind like you were nothing more than a closed chapter. But here is what they never understood. God never lets the proud rewrite the story of the pure-hearted. He allows silence for a season, yes, but that silence is not abandonment, it is preservation. Because God will never allow your name, your dignity, your truth to be permanently stained by someone who walked away covered in ego. They may have spoken first, but God always speaks last. And when He speaks, He separates falsehood from truth, like fire separates gold from impurity. You see, God is not in a rush to prove anything. He doesn't rush to defend the innocent because their innocence defends itself. His justice is slow, deliberate, and undeniable. When He moves in such a way that no one can question His judgment. The proud may laugh for a while, but their laughter echoes in empty chambers. They may build empires, but those empires sit on shaky ground, because what is built by pride can never endure. It may rise quickly, but it will fall without warning. The very people who tried to strip you of your dignity will live long enough to see that what they mocked was actually protected by heaven. The same patience they laughed at will become their shame. The very humility they exploited will become the light that exposes their darkness. And the God they thought was absent will reveal He was watching the whole time, not just observing their actions, but preparing their downfall. Pride is deceptive. It tells people they are untouchable. It makes them believe they can harm without consequence, deceive without exposure, and walk away without accountability. But Scripture says, God resists the proud. He does not tolerate them, He resists them. That means He actively works against them. And once He begins that work, no amount of charm, strategy, or manipulation can stop it. You may have been humiliated, but God is restoring your honor in places they'll never see. He's building something inside you that cannot be broken again. And the ones who wounded you with their pride will slowly feel what it means to be dismantled from within. They won't even know what's missing at first, but eventually they'll realize they don't have the peace you carry. They don't have the favor that covers you. They don't have the quiet strength that never needed to prove anything. God exalts the humble. He takes the broken, the bruised, the misjudged, and He lifts them in ways that don't require explanation. Your rise will not be loud. It won't need to be. It will be undeniable. The same people who dragged your name will hear of your restoration, and it will sting in silence, because there is no shame in being pure-hearted. There is only shame in mocking it, in misusing it, in seeing it as weakness. So let the proud walk ahead. Let them clap for themselves. Let them believe they've escaped. Their time will come, not by your doing, but by divine dismantling. God doesn't just watch, He records. He waits. And when the moment arrives, He removes everything they use to elevate themselves, bit by bit, quietly, methodically. until all that remains is the truth they buried and the soul they tried to destroy. Every tear you shed was a seed, and now the harvest is justice. They saw you crying, but they didn't flinch. They heard the tremble in your voice, but they turned away. They watched you fight back the tears, hold your breath through heartbreak, smile through pain, and they still walked away. No remorse, no hesitation, no trace of empathy. What they didn't know was that each tear you shed wasn't just grief, it was a seed, and in the divine soil of suffering, tears become the currency of justice. There's a sacred mystery in pain, especially the kind of pain endured by those with pure hearts, the kind of people who love fiercely, forgive constantly, and stay longer than they should, not out of weakness, but out of loyalty. And when these souls are broken, when they are pushed past the edge and forced to grieve alone, something unseen begins to take root in the spiritual realm. The world sees the breakdown, but heaven sees the planting. You were planting something when you wept in silence, when no one called to check on you, when you held the phone staring at a name that never texted back, when you walked into a room full of people and still felt invisible, when you told the truth and they chose the lie, when you gave and they kept taking until there was nothing left but a hollow version of you. Those moments felt like loss, but to heaven they were seeds. You see, pain in the life of the pure-hearted is never pointless. God does not waste the tears of the innocent. He bottles them. He stores them. He counts every drop. The things you cried about at 2 a.m., the heartbreak you couldn't explain to anyone, the betrayal that left you shattered. God was there for all of it. You were never alone in the room. Your suffering was witnessed, and not only witnessed, it was recorded. You were sowing righteousness in your suffering, even if you didn't realize it. You were proving your character, not just to the world, but to the heavens. And while others may have looked at your pain as weakness, God looked at it as worship. A heart that refuses to harden, even after being broken, is a heart that heaven treasures. And such a heart never goes unnoticed. But here's what they never saw coming: the harvest. They thought the tears would destroy you. They believed you'd never recover. They watched your breakdown and they mistook it for your end. But all this time your spirit was being nurtured in the dark. The roots of justice were growing beneath the soil, and now the harvest is rising, not in the form of revenge, but in the form of divine reversal. The tables are turning, slowly, silently, steadily. The very people who caused your pain are now experiencing what they never imagined would return to them. And while you were busy healing, they were busy hiding from the consequences they can't outrun. Because what you sow in suffering, God multiplies in restoration. But what they sowed in deception, God multiplies in discipline. This isn't about punishment. This is about balance, divine order, restoration of what was broken. Every time you cried out and said, "Why me, God?" He was already preparing the answer, not through lightning bolts or thunderous wrath, but through the gentle unfolding of justice, through the weight of guilt that doesn't go away, through the failure of plans built on betrayal, through sleepless nights where memories become unbearable burdens. They don't speak of you now, but they think of you often, not with peace, but with unrest. Because when someone hurts a pure-hearted soul, they don't just create a moment of pain, they create a long-lasting fracture in their own soul. They set into motion a storm that circles back, and the longer it takes to arrive, the more powerful it becomes. You, on the other hand, have been rising. Maybe not in obvious ways, maybe not with applause or spotlight, but internally, spiritually, you've been ascending. Your strength has been rebuilt in silence. Your identity has been purified by pain. And that soft heart they tried to harden, it has become your greatest weapon. Not against them, but for yourself. Because a heart that survives betrayal without turning bitter is a heart that God uses to change the world. The tears you cried were not signs of defeat. They were signs of deep capacity to love and feel. And that capacity is rare in a world full of performance and pretense. They may have thought they were taking something from you, but they were actually giving you something. A deeper connection with your Creator, a greater sense of clarity, a sharper discernment, and a front row seat to watch what happens when God responds to injustice in His own time, His own way. He never rushes, He never forgets, He lets it build. He allows the offenders to think they've gotten away. He gives them time to turn around. But when they don't, when they persist in pride, when they deny what they did, when they refuse to see the damage they caused, then He acts. And His justice is not just about compensation for you. It's about transformation for you. While they are sinking, you are being rooted. While they are unraveling, you are being restored. Your mercy was a test for them, and they failed. They never realized how sacred your mercy was. They thought your forgiveness was weakness. They saw your patience as permission. Every time you gave them another chance, they didn't reflect they took advantage. Every time you swallowed your pain to keep peace, they believed you didn't feel deeply. And when you held the door open for them to make things right, they walked right through it, only to wound you again. But what they failed to understand was that your mercy wasn't theirs to abuse. It was a test. Mercy is one of the most dangerous gifts someone can receive from a pure-hearted soul, not because it grants them power, but because it reveals their character. Mercy is divine in nature. It holds no grudge. It keeps no score. It gives more chances than are deserved. But when given to the wrong person, someone proud, selfish, manipulative, it becomes a mirror that shows just how rotten their intentions truly are. You didn't offer them mercy out of desperation. You weren't begging for their presence. You were offering them something that only those with depth can offer. Grace. The kind of grace that says, even though you hurt me, I will still leave the door unlocked. I will still give you space to return. I will still believe in your ability to change. And instead of seeing the rare and sacred value of that offer, they saw an opportunity to tighten the knife's grip. They didn't just reject your mercy. They trampled it. They laughed behind your back. They twisted your kindness to others. They acted like your love was a joke, a flaw, a burden. And yet, you kept forgiving. You kept waiting for the day they would see it. For the day they would look back and realize what they had been given. But they never did. And that was their test. God often sends pure-hearted people into the lives of the broken to give them one last chance at redemption, not because the pure-hearted need fixing, but because the broken need examples of how love truly looks. You were that example. You were sent into their life as a mercy, a living reminder that there is still light, still softness, still sincerity in the world. You didn't have to be there, but you were, not for your sake, but for theirs. And the way they treated you, it revealed everything. It revealed how far gone their conscience really was. It showed how quickly they traded truth for convenience. It exposed the way their ego would always be more important than your tears. And it made it clear that they were not just hurting you, they were rejecting the very hand God extended to them through you. When you offered that one last chance and they chose betrayal again, when you gave them mercy and they used it as a weapon, what they failed to see was that this wasn't just a moment in a relationship. This was a divine examination of their soul. And they failed. But don't mistake that failure for a reflection of you. Their rejection of your heart is not your shame, it's their sentence. Because there are certain hearts in this world that are so deeply loved by God, so fiercely protected, that anyone who intentionally harms them is no longer just accountable to the one they hurt. They are now accountable to the God who sent that person as a test. And now the test is over. They can no longer say they didn't know what love looked like. They can no longer claim ignorance. They can no longer hide behind fake apologies or superficial charm. Because they had the real thing in front of them, they had a heart that stayed, a heart that wept in silence, a heart that wanted restoration more than revenge. And still, they chose destruction. Now that choice belongs to them, and so does its consequence. You didn't lose when you forgave. You didn't fail when you showed them mercy. You passed your test. You proved that love can still exist in a world that tries to crush it, that kindness can still be extended even when it's not returned, that there are people who will still open their arms to the ones who burned them. But now their time is up. Their window has closed, and the mercy they mocked has become the very testimony against them. So now, dear soul, look back at everything you endured, not with sorrow, but with clarity. What they did to you was never unseen. What they took from you was never lost. Every betrayal, every lie, every silent wound carved into your spirit was witnessed by the one who does not sleep, who does not miss a single tear, who does not ignore the cries of the innocent. You may have walked alone. You may have questioned your worth. You may have pleaded with heaven to ask why someone you trusted could do something so cruel. But today understand this truth. You were not abandoned. You were being avenged. The reason it took so long is because God does not act in haste. He gives people chances, time, and space to repent. But when they mock that mercy, when they trample on the heart He protected, He responds. And His response is not just justice, it is restoration. You were never weak for loving them. You were never a fool for forgiving them. Your purity was not a flaw. It was a reflection of God's own nature flowing through you. And that's exactly why He takes it personally when someone dares to hurt a heart that resembles His. Now the seasons have shifted. You are no longer the broken one. You are no longer the weeping one. You are the rising one, the one who passed the test of character, the one heaven honors, the one God defends. And as for them, the ones who laughed, the ones who used, the ones who discarded you without remorse, they are being dealt with, not by your hands, but by the same hands that calmed the storm, that parted the seas, that judge in righteousness and repay in full. Hold your head high, lift your spirit. You are not a victim. You are the evidence that God does not forget the pure-hearted, and those who hurt you, they didn't just lose you. They lost God's favor, because when someone hurts the pure-hearted, they don't just break a person, they invite a curse. And when heaven moves, no one escapes.